between those athletes who you would consider the top iconic players who do what they do at the highest level. It's not only data that helps to elevate their performance, but it's no coincidence that they're performing really well off the court too when it comes to their brand and marketing and business.
So I'd love to understand from you, why did you feel like a sabbatical was the right decision for you?
I knew a sabbatical was the right decision because I've already set my mind on it a decade ago. I remember reading this book that many might know, or maybe you watched the movie, Eat, Pray, Love. And I remember putting on my board, I will do a Eat, Pray, Love.
One of the things that I would like to do is to help companies create this sabbatical benefit for their employees, because to me, it is a talent retention
I love
opportunity
that.
and a talent recruitment opportunity if you decide to add this ability to take a sabbatical to your employee benefits. Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the 10X Blueprint podcast. My name is Simone Knight, and I am your host. Today, we have an amazing conversation planned for you today with my special guest, Arlesha Amazan. And before we really get into it, let me give you a little introduction about this woman. She is fantastic. She's amazing, and you're going to love her. So, Arlesha is the host of the Hey, It's Arlesha podcast, streaming on Apple and Amazon, and she is a seasoned sports marketing executive. She's a champion of brands and athletes. Her career mix entails working with prestigious companies like CAA, one of the world's most valuable sports agencies, and working with the likes of NBA Hall of Famer Dwayne Wade, four-time NBA champion Stephen Curry, and with champion brands such as Ally Bank, Google, and more. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our special guest this week, Miss Arlesha Amazon. Hello, hello, Arlesha. How are you?
Hello, I am well. Simone, thank you for having me.
Well, I can't wait to talk with you today because there's so much to discuss. You and I have so much in common. You're on sabbatical. That's a new thing. A lot of people are talking about these days, this whole sabbatical life. So I want to talk with you about that and some of the lessons that you've been learning from that and how you've changed your life and some of the lessons that you've picked up from some of your famous clients in the sport industry. Before we get into it, I always love to do some rapid fire questions just to sort of have a little fun with my guest, right? And give
Okay,
the audience a chance to get to know you. So, are you ready for the
I
rapid
am
fire?
ready.
All
Yes,
right,
ready to
fantastic.
go.
So, as I said, you've been on a sabbatical. I know you've been on some great trips, which we definitely want to talk a little bit about. But with all of that, question, shorts or sarong when you are walking along the beach of San Tropez or Thailand or wherever you are, shorts or sarong?
I will choose wrong.
Oh, okay. So a little bit of sexiness right there, a little flavor for you.
Yes, that is my style.
By the way, going along, second part to that question, where's the best beach or best seaside vacation that you've taken so far?
I think Turks and Caicos. Turks and Caicos for me has the best waters that you can find on the beach, so I would have to choose Turks.
Okay, Turks and Caicos. All
Yeah.
right. And while you're in Turks and Caicos, cocktail on the beach or champagne?
So I am going to choose champagne just to speak celebration into my life going into the summer, the rest of the year. So champagne.
Ooh, okay. All right. That goes with the sarong too. I like it.
Yes.
I like it. All right. Most fun vacation activity that you've had so far while you've been on sabbatical?
On sabbatical, I mean, I can't stress enough that it's hard to choose. I've had some fun activities, but if I had to choose a fun vacation activity in general, I would have to go back to taking a dance class in Ethiopia. That stands out for me.
Wow, I cannot even imagine what that must be like. Oh, the colors, the
Yes,
sounds, the feel of the drums. Oh, yes, love it.
absolutely.
Love it, love it. Okay. And this is a great question. I can't live without fill in the blank.
Mm. I can't live without my Bible.
Ooh,
Yeah.
surprising answer for me. Wow. Okay, please go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, the days where you might need some refreshing, some inspiration, where you need to be reminded of who you are and whose you are, that for me is what I would deem necessary. So every day I need a devotional or a proverb to keep me motivated and going in life. So a Bible would be that for me.
I love what you say, reminded of who you are and whose you are. That is Lovely. I just love that quote. Oh, okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Desert island question. 3 things to take on a desert island.
So I would take for me a Toni Morrison book, a photo album to relive memories and stay present, but also in the past and relive those beautiful memories, and then a compass just in case I could walk and find my way back.
Woo, I love the practicality because I was just about to say a lot of times people don't answer that question with, "I would take a fire starter or a machete to cut down things or, twine to make a
Right.
shelter," right? So
Right,
you
exactly.
you said, "Yeah, I'm gonna take something a little bit more practical with me, a compass." That's fantastic. Okay, so my last rapid fire question is something I call first jobs. So I have a theory that your first paying job is a window into who you will become. What was your first paying job? Not paying by your auntie or your parents or anything like that, but your first paying job otherwise.
My first pay job, do you remember Loman's? The retail store?
Oh my god, that was a while ago. Uh-huh.
Loman's, actually my first job out of high school.
Mhm. Okay, and what did you do with at Loman's?
I was just a regular cashier. I remember staying up till 3 AM. We're not even staying up, more so being in the store until 3 AM for inventory nights. Your first retail job, imagine what that would be. That was my role.
Okay. And so were there any lessons that you took away from that job? Anything that you learned about yourself, about others, about the work environment?
Honestly, I probably took away learning how to fold properly, as cliche as that sounds. I mean, I'm 18 and just starting out college, doing my first job. So folding up t-shirts and making sure that I know how to place things properly in a closet was what I took away from that.
That's pretty interesting because, when I hear people say that one of their first paying jobs was a retail job, which is relatively a common thing for teenagers. But what I realize about that is that what you take away from it is not being afraid to approach other people
Okay, that's fair.
and talking and the customer service aspect of it. And for me, going back to my theory about the first jobs, your role in sports marketing and having to approach these athletes and come up with a way to design a brand around them, to me, I think is related to retail
Okay. I think that's an interesting perspective. I've never thought of it that way.
marketing, right? So,
Exactly. We always
so
find a way to take a kind of marketing lesson from everything. I love that about this field.
you know what the interesting thing, when I went to school as an engineer and I was not at all thinking about any role having to do with marketing or business, I was always focused on the technology and operations and things like that. It wasn't until many years later when I decided to become an entrepreneur that I realized, man, a business course really should have been required for all
Yeah,
students,
mhm.
right?
I agree.
Engineering or otherwise,
Right.
because you really should understand how to start a business, market a business,
Mhm.
really focus on your product and really connect with others. So it's not just problem solving from a technological perspective. It's also, which is what engineers do, but
Right.
problem solving from a general business perspective. And the legs that knowledge, once I got it for myself, has given me has really changed my career over the past 20 plus years. So,
Absolutely.
right? So you're right in that there is a marketing lesson in just about everything that we
No,
can do.
absolutely. Yes.
So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your background in sports marketing. Tell me, how did you get into sports marketing? Why that field?
So, my background in sports marketing is a very unique ride. I got into it just, plain and simple. It was my passion. I remember being 16 in high school back in the day and being the senior editor of my sports section of my school newspaper. I was really big into sports. I was the one who was going around to all the high school jocks and interviewing them and actually telling them one day that I would represent them. And lo and behold, I got in the field. But I began my career in sports and entertainment in the summer of 2010. I like to call that the summer of the big three. I'm based in Miami, Florida. So the big three for me is a nod to 2010 when LeBron James and Chris Bosh joined Dwayne Wade to form the Miami Heat. So my first job actually in sports was an internship with Dwayne Wade, actually. I worked on his management team and got behind the scenes of managing the ins and outs of an emerging superstar, right? By then, he had already won his first championship, which Shaquille O'Neal, but his brand was beginning to take off very globally. In addition to Dwayne, I got some further experience in the sports landscape working at the Miami Dolphins for a year and a half in their alumni relations department, marketing alumni players like Dan Marino and Don Shula. If you're from Miami, if any of your audience members are from Miami, they would know who they are. I got my first taste in what it means to market players and keep their names relevant while driving brand equity for the football organization in the South Florida community. So I worked for the Dolphins for about 2 seasons. And then eventually I got a call back from the Wade team to return to his management team to manage brand partnerships. So I returned in that capacity. And then after a year, say in 2013, I believe it was, I transitioned over to the agency side, CAA Sports, who at that time was already representing Dwayne and still does. So for me, it was a seamless pivot from independent
Mhm.
management to the traditional agency side. And for those who may not be familiar with the agency business, CAA is one of the world's most valuable talent agencies, representing
Mhm.
Hollywood talent from motion picture to TV, music to sports. And when I say talent, I mean what the market would call celebrities. This agency, as well as the other ones who compete with CAA in the business, handle everything from a talent's casting in a movie or TV show, and for the athletes, handles the on-court contract with the teams, handling everything from their contract when they get drafted to contract extensions, trade deals, and so forth. And most notably, a huge revenue stream for the business, the agency business, is endorsement deals.
Mhm.
So when you see that athlete in a commercial, CAA likely played the role in brokering that partnership with that brand on behalf of the athlete. So my transition to CAA really kicked off my sports marketing career because I started off on the management side and then now coming over to this agency opened up the opportunity to hone in my contribution to the industry from a marketing standpoint. And that's truly where, from a marketing side, at a company like a CAA, that's where an agent or a practitioner markets multiple talent or celebrities and creates value for that talent by leveraging their image and likeness with other
Mhm.
mainstream properties. That really started and kicked off my sports marketing career.
Wow, okay. So right out of high school, basically, well, not even out of high school, in high school, you had already started on this trajectory. Were you already working at Loman's?
Actually, I started working at Loman's right after graduation, high school graduation, yes.
Okay.
So my freshman year of college.
Okay, all right. So this was just a sort of interim blip to put some money in the pocket while while going to school and getting ready for the big future here. Working around all of these big celebrities must be so exciting and also probably a little nerve-wracking. Talk about some of the types of projects that you've worked on that you found really exciting. Give us a little in window of insight into what that's like building a brand for a sports celebrity.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that every athlete has a different approach that you have to take in how you build their brands. I mentioned Dwayne Wade, and there was a handful of other players that I worked with around the league, not to go through a Rolodex of a roster, but also most notably my most recent role in the industry. I worked for four-time NBA champion Stephen Curry at his company, SC30 Inc. And that was a very unique role. I operated as a strategic partnerships and marketing executive, senior director at the company. And my role with him, my project or long-term project within that role was focused on building in more equity and value
Mhm.
into his brand programs and platforms that will hopefully outlive Stefan's career when he retires, right? And so Dwayne, and I think we're going to talk about this more later on in the show. Dwayne was more so building out his brand portfolio around his fashion. When I first started working with Dwayne, again, I give the timeline of 2010. He started to make a name for himself, not only on the court, winning championships with Shaquille and LeBron and becoming a global household name, but he was very strategic in how he built his name in other areas such as fashion. And we built a whole brand portfolio around fashion partnerships. And so that was a heavy part of my working with him. And another player might be I'm working on a project based on their love for, let's just say, wine, right? I think
Mhm.
that what's interesting about my role or my working in this industry in general is that these athletes cross over into so many other territories and that it sometimes feels like you're not working in sports. It feels like you might be working in lifestyle. You might be working in finance and investments and venture, just depending
Mhm.
on what the athlete has a passion for and what's viable to build their brand around.
So with all of that in terms of and you just mentioned something really interesting I wanna double click on, which is the connection between this idea of strategic brand marketing, not just with athletes, but in general. Because in my business, I'm marketing brands and helping brands create awareness and sort of expand into different areas and different audiences. But you're doing the same thing because in this case, the product is the athlete, right? And their name and where that can go. So, what about the crossover into fashion, into electronics? Because these days athletes are moguls, right? They have shoes, they have cooking shows, they have so many different areas. What about that transiency of this idea of the athlete as a brand and how that goes into different areas?
Yeah, I think it just comes with the territory now. It's normalized for the athlete to pursue other passions. I think that there have been other personalities who opened up that door in many ways. You can point to the Magic Johnsons, you can point to
Mhm.
the Michael Jordans who created this permission for athletes to be able to create businesses for themselves and to really make a name for themselves off the court. And with that, if you are an executive or an agent, your job is to find business opportunities and more specifically revenue generating opportunities, right? Outside of the $1 million contract that player has to play for a specific team or league for a certain amount of years. And so if you're trying to create something viable and sustainable, it's in both interests, right? The practitioner and the athlete to say, hey, let's get you activated in some other areas. What do you love to do? What are you passionate about? And not everything will stick and not
Mhm.
everyone is a brand, but for those who have the justification to actually be viable with creating something that will again be sustainable, be interesting to consumers, why not? This is an opportunity where we're in a creator economy as well, and athletes have participated in that since the inception. And it's great to see how many different ways and trajectories that can go.
So, when you're creating this brand for the athlete, something that comes to mind, which is related to this topic of branding in general, as an individual who may want to create a brand for themselves or maybe branch out into from executive to maybe they want to do like a maybe they're working in manufacturing and want to do a line of cookware. I don't know. What are some of the things that you look for in an athlete that says, okay, I think that this could be a good angle for you with the brand? Does the sponsorship come first or was the idea does the idea from the athlete come first and then you go from there?
It depends on the context. It depends on, honestly, the market. Sometimes the partnership brings the opportunity, and the athlete can say, hey, I want to take this partnership to the next level and create something new or create a capsule collection. Or it could be the athlete creating this idea from scratch, right? And kind of taking this top down approach, or actually a bottom up approach rather than top down, right? Where the brand says, "Hey, we're interested in XYZ player and we have this marketing budget and we want to activate." Instead, it's the player going to the brand and saying, "Hey, I have this IP, I have this program and platform," i.e., someone like a Stephen Curry. That was that opportunity. We were building out his own IP programming and platform that we can then sell out to the market and to
Mhm.
brands, right? So it's two way, but most importantly, again, it's first and foremost, and I always advise my clients to go out and play and do well. And that comes first. First things first. I hate to be cliche, but I'll bring it up because it's trending and not that we'll go there. But Caitlin Clark is not who she is if she's not first performing on the court. So
Mhm.
first perform, first and foremost. Perform there, show your work, show your value there. And then secondary, activate your passion. And our job as the agent or the manager who's on that player's team who's responsible for, again, creating sustainable, viable opportunities. Our job is to ensure that the market will react to it. Our job is to ensure that it's viable, it's marketable, there's consumers. It's no different than any other brand or any other business, right? We all have the same responsibility in making sure that this will make sense for business. And if the idea doesn't stick, if the passion doesn't stick, then we keep it moving and we put it on the shelf and we find something else to be relevant for.
Fantastic. Okay, so make sure you do what you do first and do
Exactly.
that well. And then from there, those brand opportunities will come to branch out and to create some additional IP as a result of the great work that you've been doing in your field. I think that makes sense, right? Let's talk about a little bit on data and sports. Now, I had seen for many years now, data has become a big piece of sports, right? You have a lot of statistics on the players and how they're performing, and I'd like to see from your perspective in sports marketing, how you see those the decisions for branding a player and expanding their intellectual property, how those decisions are being impacted by not only data, but also AI and data, like these emerging technologies.
Sports has definitely become more of a data driven business and industry, right? There's an evolution in how data has been used across the board. So, if you're talking sports broadcasting, if you are someone who watched sports, you've probably noticed it over the years. There's been enhancement to your viewing experience. You're going to get real time statistics, it's going to come up on the screen, and it's going to give the broadcasters commentary that is backed by data, backed by facts, and not just opinions, right? And I think that's been an evolution that we've seen not just recently, but 10, 15, for 20 years, right? And then there's also the evolution of data that we've seen prevalent in sports when it comes to on the field, right? Data that helps to enhance performance of players, but also helps to enhance business decisions, right? Sports
Mhm.
organizations leverage data to monitor ticket sales or determine when they use dynamic pricing strategies or to craft specific marketing campaigns using data to create insights, right? That's something that I've certainly was purposeful to own in my skills on, digging into insights that's backed by data. Now, when you talk about insights backed by data, that becomes very interesting when you talk about these talent or entertainers or athletes who are essentially brands, right? And
Mhm.
not, again, not everyone is the brand, let's be honest. But for those who are, you've seen the intention in how they use data. And what I find to be interesting is that there is a correlation between those athletes who you would consider the top iconic players who do what they do at the highest level. It's not only data that helps to elevate their performance, but it's no coincidence that they're performing really well off the court too when it comes
Mhm.
to their brand and marketing and business. Tom Brady is someone that pops to mind for me. He is someone who has leveraged data to elevate his on the field performance and to also leverage his longevity in the game. And he's considered the icon and the GOAT when it comes to the quarterback position. And
Mhm.
then you also have Serena Williams, who leverages data in venture capital. And you see her incorporation of that in her business with Serena Ventures. And who else can I name? There's Cristiano Ronaldo, who uses data to optimize his physical training. And if you see his body, you can tell he is optimizing something with data because there's not 1 ounce of fat.
I find it very interesting how much data and technology has really taken over, really transformed sports, considering that probably decades ago, people would think, oh, jocks don't deal with data and science and all of that. No, no, no. We're just out here playing ball, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, whatever it is. And we let the geeks deal with the data. Now everybody is responsible for data, right?
Mhm.
Everyone has to use those numbers to improve on their performance, no matter what their performance is. And I love that we live in it. I love that we've all come to this realization how important analytics are to our daily work, to our daily lives, to be honest with you. That's super cool. As we're thinking about how the lessons that you've seen and how your career has evolved in sports marketing, What do you see in terms of, are more people getting into this field? Because I don't really meet many people in sports marketing and branding.
For me, my journey and my trajectory, I always preface when I talk to people about how I got in. It's a very unique way of getting in. I remember when I was first pursuing a career in sports after college, you didn't really have, if you look at 2024 today, we didn't have that back in 2010 or 20, I think it was 2009. I might be getting my dates wrong. But it was hard to find avenues of getting in besides working for your local sports team. And not a knock to anyone who, works at sports teams, but I for me knew that I wanted to be in the industry in a very unique way. And now those who are coming into the industry or those who are looking to pivot into sports, you have a myriad of ways that you can get in. It's not just your sports agency, it's not just Nike and Gatorades of the world. You have venture capital firms who are building out sports divisions, right? You have tech companies that are getting into or that have gotten into the sports business, right? Meta is heavy in sports, Amazon is heavy in sports, Apple getting its legs in sports, even Netflix, even though Netflix try to deny they're getting into the sports content, they're playing in the space. And so
Yeah,
there's
they have
many
live
different
sports now.
ways.
Yeah. Mhm.
Absolutely. There's many different ways of getting into sports marketing or sports business in general.
I love it because it wasn't something that I had on my radar, but I realized that, like you said, there's a lot of legs here where there's a lot of transferable knowledge and skills into gaming, for example, in VC. I love that you mentioned that there's this big investment. And I know the NFL is really focused on getting more a pipeline of people playing the football again to extend the popularity of that sport into more decades, because I think that at some point that pipeline was drying up a little bit. And so there is this concerted effort on many different industries to really tap into this thing, which is one of the major veins of entertainment and commerce in America and around the world. The popularity, for instance, of soccer around the world is undeniable, or football, depending on what culture you're coming from. And so I love that. And so I want to switch gears a little bit, right? As we talk about how things can sort of morph from one thing to another. And I want to talk with you about your sabbatical journey. That word sabbatical is being used a lot more than before, especially since the pandemic. I myself took a 2-year sabbatical from work and decided to go in a different direction and really reconfigure, focus on what was important to me, and rest and relax and recharge and come back with Simone 3.0. So I'd love to understand from you, why did you feel like a sabbatical was the right decision for you?
Yeah. I knew a sabbatical was the right decision because I've already set my mind on it a decade ago. I remember reading this book that many might know, or maybe you watched the movie, Eat, Pray, Love. I read that in 2012. And I remember putting on my board, I don't know where that particular board is, but it was on a board. I put up on a board, I will do a Eat, Pray, Love. And I always kept it in mind. And just naturally, I've always been that person that was intentional about balancing my work and my life. And I would be the one to evangelize to even my fellow peers, hey, use your PTO, or
Mhm.
being strategic about even some of my colleagues saying, hey, when you go on PTO, I got you. Just let me know what you need. Right. And I've always valued that. That's always been my value. So doing a sabbatical is absolutely Arlesha. It's authentic to me. It's
Mhm.
just not authentic to the industry I come from. Absolutely. I have so many colleagues who or peers who have reached out to me and said, "How did you do it? How were you able to do this?" I can't even imagine being able to take the time away. And it's not that they wouldn't want to, they just don't see how they can fit it in. But there's certainly a way to do that.
In your newsletter, you talked about this in one of the episodes where you talked about honoring your rest ethic with intention. And you gave a list about some things that you should be doing or could be doing on sabbatical. So I want to talk a little bit about that list and also how you prepare for taking that time off. So, what are some of the things that you say to get ready for the sabbatical? What do you need to do? Tell the audience, because I know some people are just like, "Oh, a sabbatical. Oh, but can I do it? Is it possible?" And the answer is yes, it is possible when you do it with intention. So let's talk about preparing.
Look, yes, you can definitely plan and prepare for a sabbatical. It is absolutely possible. And I would say that the first way you do so is by identifying your opportune time to take it. You point the time of your career roadmap or the time of season, right, within a given year where it makes sense to take a sabbatical, right? So, first and foremost, it's finding that opportune time. That's what I call it, the opportune time. Next, it's ensuring that you have the finances to sustain that time.
Get that money.
Absolutely. So if you're not working or if you're an entrepreneur, you definitely want to make sure that you're prepping in advance. So if you say to yourself, I want to take a sabbatical for 4 months or 6 months, you want to determine that you have at least 6 months of expenses, right? And times that by the number of months you like to be on sabbatical. Now, if you are wanting to do a sabbatical while still employed, I would say just take advantage of your work benefits, like leveraging your PTO bank. Absolutely leveraging your PTO bank. And, also some people have sabbaticals as a work benefit, right? Take advantage of that. So if you are hitting that number of year mark in which your job will offer that sabbatical, if you have that work privilege, take advantage of that. And for those who work in education, they can be strategic with the timing. They have every summer off. Honestly, that's a annual sabbatical. And I'm low key like, okay, should I do education? Should I pivot? Because sabbatical life, it's one to experience. But all jokes aside, timing could work in your favor if you're strategic with that. And the most important point is having work support. If you're taking a sabbatical for, let's say, 60 to 90 days away from the office, you want to ensure that you have a support of people who can offer coverage. And whether that's a direct colleague or an executive assistant, someone needs to keep the ball rolling. So that's probably, I would say, the trickier part of planning a sabbatical. I would say that's a barrier for many
Mhm.
people. They can't even fathom, okay, who's gonna cover my client while I'm away? And that I could see that being a demotivator for many people to even plan one. But my biggest advice that I tell people is that you have to test it. You have to test it. So test out a PTO week where you can go on vacation and just see how your team performs, see how your client responds. Test it out and be smart about it. You don't want to test it out when it's a busy season. You want to maybe test it out when I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, the importance of that time is maybe at a 6 or 7, right?
Okay.
You don't wanna test
Okay.
it out at a 10 because then you don't wanna lose your job, but just test it out and see what the reaction is, and based on that reaction, it will give you all of the data, because we're talking about data, all of the data that you need to say to myself, "Is it feasible for me to take a sabbatical?" And if you find that you continually test out your PTO and the coverage does not work out for you, you might have to come to yourself and use that as an aha moment and say, maybe this is not the place for me if I want to take a sabbatical. Because what's interesting for me, I was able to take a sabbatical not at the place that I even was when I said I wanted to take a sabbatical, right? It took another company and role to create that opportune time. So that's something to keep in mind.
I think you've said so many things that I want to unpack. One thing is the importance of the vision, right?
Mm,
To
mm,
have the vision of what you would like to accomplish as a goal, as an objective, write it down, put it in front of you, put that idea in your mind. And then the second thing after the vision is to plan for this break. I decided to leave my current role at the time in order to take the sabbatical, but you're right that you do not have to leave your role in order to take a sabbatical if it is planned. And one of the things that I realized that it obviously is very important in the planning is family support, job support,
right.
and financial support, right? You need
Absolutely.
those three things lined up in order to take a sabbatical where you're taking any more than 30 days off. You've got to have those things: family support, job support, and financial support.
That's right.
And one of the things that decided that I would like to do is to help companies create this sabbatical benefit for their employees, because to me, it is a talent retention
I love that.
opportunity and a talent recruitment opportunity if you decide to add this ability to take a sabbatical to your employee benefits. And as we go more and more into certain fields, especially tech fields, and recruiting people who are Gen Z or Gen Alpha
Mm,
coming up, then these generations realize the benefit of mental health and stability and time off and using the PTO, as you mentioned, Arlesha. And so, what does that mean in terms of designing that into the health benefit? For me, that is simple. If you say, as a retention opportunity for your talented staff, if you say you're available, your opportunities to get a sabbatical after 3 years, let's say, because 3 years seems to be the sweet spot between when people start to leave a company, somewhere between 2 and 3 years. So if
Right.
your idea is to retain people, that would be a good time to implement the sabbatical and say that you can take a sabbatical if you as long as you've been here for 3 years. Now, how do you get that financial support? You've got to save towards it. And guess what? We
Absolutely.
already have those mechanisms in the workplace to save towards these things. We do that with our 401k plan. So you can do a paycheck deduction, a payroll
Mhm.
deduction towards saving towards your gross salary for the time that you have off. So if you say after 3 years you can take 3 months, then okay, then that means you have 3 years to save for 3 months of salary, and you just divide the 3 months of salary over the course of the payroll deductions in the 3 years, and now you've saved towards the sabbatical. That is it, right? And if you have a staff member that is able to float and cover or just cover that with a temporary support, then now the business support is there as well, and it does not necessarily have to cost the business more because the sabbatical is unpaid because the employee is funding their own sabbatical. So to me, that is the way to make this a systematic part of your benefits, your retention plan, and also an opportunity for your employees to get that mental health break and really change the way that we approach the future of work in America. What do you think about that?
No, I absolutely love that. I'm sitting here thinking about how I wish that was normalized and offered even in, the sports and entertainment business in a way that it's not necessarily normalized. There's ways in which you can say to yourself, okay, for certain industries that sounds more realistic, right? But I think what's been tricky in my industry for so long, especially for those who have roles where you are attached to talent because especially talent who always has something going on
Mhm.
year over year over year. Think about let's step away from sports for a second. Think about your favorite and for your audience members, think about your favorite actress, think about your favorite artist, your musician, and think about their schedule. Now imagine if you were their manager. Can you take sabbatical? And so there are opportunities where even in from a micro level, normalizing even the systematic structure of how we manage. I think that I take a page from and what I appreciate my time working within the Dwayne Wade team at CAA, it's a vast team. Like you're talking and probably more, but 10 people. And so I think it was circa 2018, 2019 is when I really started to step away from the office. I would travel a lot for work. And then what I would do is I would tag on personal work or personal trips after my work trips were
Oh,
done.
good idea.
Yeah. So that was my way of getting around to getting some leisure in. But when I was finally taking time away from the office for my own leisure trips where I could take that trip to Ethiopia and take a dance class in Ethiopia or go away to Kenya and be in Africa for a week, I was able to do that when we expanded our team,
Mhm.
right? And we had coverage. And now we had people at the office where I could say, you know what, she's got it. And
So how did you do it? What did you do? Was it a matter of training? Was it a matter of building the knowledge base, adding staff? Tell us how you did that while you but so you were basically doing these micro sabbaticals, essentially. I'm coining that term right now, micro sabbatical. So tell us how you aligned the work life with that.
yes, and I wrote about micro sabbaticals as well, finding opportunities to take time away from the office, even if it's 1 month. A micro sabbatical could be 3 weeks. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be, overly extended. But yes, it's training your team and it's trusting your team because you can train and not trust. And trust. It's training, trusting, bringing on other experts who you're not the only expert at the table. I see that a lot in my industry where it's hard for people to even step away for to take their PTO because if they go, there's who's going to be the digital content expert to make sure that the ship keeps rolling, right?
Mhm.
We were very, not only did we have a vast agent team, but for Dwayne specifically, we had third party agency partners who can step in and say, hey, if I'm not here to oversee the content plan, I know that our agency partner has it, right? Bringing on agency partners and training and trusting, all of that really worked out and shaped itself where I was able to take time away to have those so and so micro sabbaticals as well.
Fantastic. I think we all know that we should be training people more and getting that number 2 person in place. But again, it's going back to what you said about work ethic and intention, right? So you have a work ethic, so you should have a rest ethic as well. And if you have the vision that you would like to take a micro sabbatical for a few weeks or take a full sabbatical of 3 months to a year or so forth, like anything else, you've got to plan for it. You've got to plan
Right.
for it in terms of work support, family support, financial support. We talked about the money. You can save towards it with a payroll deduction if it's instituted within your company, or you can just decide to do that on your own and just do the math. But this piece about having comfort in the time off, I think is super important. And we don't really do that a lot, even a long weekend. Remember, now imagine, I know I've done this where I've taken time off on a long weekend and maybe I'm taking the Friday and I'm taking the Monday. But then I'm constantly checking my emails and I'm worried about when I go back to work on Tuesday, the mountain of emails and things like that will be there. And so it's like you end up shying away from taking time off when everybody else is not off because the work is not slowing down at all.
Exactly.
So do you have any advice to deal with that anxiety that may come along with that as you try to test out the sabbatical life as you talked about?
Just got to suck that anxiety up. That is my biggest advice. You've got to suck that one up. And listen, again, when you have that structure, when you have the team support, when you have that instituted, that will give you more and more confidence to take that time off. And like everything, when you come back from something, there's going to be something to work on. I'm on my last mile or probably last half mile of sabbatical as we're recording this podcast now. And I was able to accomplish a lot during the sabbatical. It was very productive, but there's going to be more for me to have to tackle after sabbatical. And I spent the last, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks prepping my mind. Okay, get ready because we pushed this off because it made sense to push it off, and then we just gotta go and tackle it. And so I would say, and this is something that this is very tactical advice, but something that I did earlier on is I tried to think about, and I didn't obsess over it because I didn't want to spend my time ruminating over it, but create a to-do list of the things that you can make an assumption will meet you when you get back to the office or meet you when you get back from vacation or from sabbatical so that when you get there, you already have a structure. And you have a structure and it'll ease that anxiety for you.
Okay, so in terms of being intentional when you come back to reduce the anxiety, I love that. You set that expectation so you're not crazy when you get back. And also, once you do that, I feel like you'll find that you can also make a plan to
Right.
reduce the potential issues that may be facing you when you return too. So I think that's just a great exercise that we probably all should be doing when we go on a week or 2 week vacation, because I think that's a thing that there's all these potential opportunities of things that could go wrong that you should be able to do
Right.
some sort of risk plan and response for those things. But while you're on the sabbatical, Arlesha, what are some things that you should do to plan for the sabbatical, that intention in terms of maybe trips you want to take or things you want to accomplish while you're away? I don't think that there's a sabbatical guide, or even if there is, what's Arlesha's guide to the fabulous sabbatical?
Yes, and that's why I'm commending myself. I did not have this in my bingo card of, starting a podcast or starting the newsletter, but it's essentially that at least for this time, in future seasons, I'm gonna go a little bit more nitty-gritty about some sports career behind the scenes, but this time around, it's focused on sabbatical. It's giving everyone those tips, and to answer that question, when I decided to take the sabbatical, I purposed in my mind that if I'm gonna take this 4 months off, which it ended up being more, what do I intend to get out of it? Intentions can I set? And so I created a list of everything from taking dance classes to perfecting my Spanish and Creole speaking skills to actual pertinent activities such as redesigning my home office or connecting with family that I haven't seen in years. And obviously, the obvious one is travel, right? I've been very vocal about this eat, pray, love travel experience that I had and that I curated. The intentions list helps to keep sabbatical productive. And my opinion is that you don't want to take all that time off and not come away with some personal outcomes because there's a difference between taking a sabbatical and just taking a week off,
Mhm.
right? I think that sabbatical should be more intentional, right? And so I put down what are the personal outcomes that I want, what are the new goals that I want to achieve, in addition to receiving all of the rejuvenation and the refreshing that comes
Yeah,
along with
let's not forget
taking
about
time
the
off.
rejuvenation.
That's right. That's key. That's prioritized. And then secondary is like, all right, what have I not been able to accomplish these past year and 2 years that I can now say I can do? Because I don't want to look back at this time and say, man, I had all the time in the world and I didn't do XYZ. And that actually would make me feel worser than before I took
Mhm.
the sabbatical, honestly. So that intentions list was very productive for me.
So this is pretty interesting because I did not think about a specific list that of things that I was going to do before I went on sabbatical. It was so funny because everyone assumed that I was going to travel a lot when I went on sabbatical. Now, I have at the time that I started, my child was, I think, under 10 years old. So I'm just like, no, I'm not going to be all over the world. My child still has to go to school. There's homework and all these things. So travel was not really a part of my particular sabbatical time. It was all about rest and rejuvenation for me, to be honest with you. I said, I wanted to enjoy my pool. I want to enjoy time in my backyard and in the home that I spent so much time creating this coziness factor for and spend time with my husband, my child, and do things like pick her up after school at 3 o'clock and have ice cream on a random Tuesday. These
Love
were
that.
some of my goals for a sabbatical when I first started. So it was because being in the fast paced media and marketing environment, you just don't often have time for these things. So after I think after that initial time of maybe the first couple of weeks where I would wake up and be able to sit outside on my pool deck and listen to the water fountain and literally listening to the trees. This was that rest and relaxation, rejuvenation for me. Then I started to do the reflection and the internal work, journaling, and thinking about what was Simone 3.0 about? Who do I want to be in this next go around, this next iteration of my career? And I figured out that it was essentially an evolution of who I already was. My brand is always about blending creative technology and innovation. And that's who I am always, and that's who I continue to be. But I wanted to really do this focus with artificial intelligence and augmented reality and modernizing marketing. And that's where I am now. That's what my agency does. However, it took a while for me to really sort out what that means.
Right.
And it took a lot of introspection, a lot of reading and research and learning and the stack of industry knowledge that I did not have a chance to look at before. And now I would go through those things in the morning and set a schedule of going back to yoga and going back to Pilates to prioritize my health. And so I put in my daily schedule, I put time in the morning for rest and reflection and introspection, time for reading, time for exercising, time for the family. And I did that each day. And I would rotate different days for different things that had more of a priority on different things and trips to visit parents and things like that. And that was really the intention list that I set for my own sabbatical. And I realized that will be different for everyone. But I think
Right.
from a category perspective, setting categories of things that you want to do about education, about health, about reconnecting with people, and about your career, and about travel. I think if you create something in each of those 5 categories, I think you end up with a list that is going to be unique to you, but also allows you to look back at it and go, "Yes, I finally did the things that I wanted to do, and now I feel like I have had that rest, and I've approached it with intention," right? I love that this discussion about people taking sabbaticals is coming up more and more. And I don't
Right.
know who decided that only professors and clergy people and educators were allowed to take sabbaticals before. Who decided that?
Right,
Let's
exactly.
let's
Yes.
take that back. Let's rebrand that, right?
Yes.
And what we discuss in terms of incorporating a sabbatical as a benefit and a way for talent retention, I think is a great thing. So I'm on the Arlesha bandwagon of let's do this with intention. Let's reinvent the way that we approach life and come back and be better than ever before.
Exactly. I love that. I love that for you, and I love that for us.
Absolutely. Hopefully, there'll be more of us taking dance classes in Ethiopia in our near future,
Highly
or
recommend.
right? Or salsa classes in Miami. If you're in like
Yes,
Nebraska or something like that listening, a salsa class in Miami might be the top thing on your list.
that's
So,
right.
Alicia, thank you so much for visiting us today and to being on the 10X Blueprint podcast. You have brought some joy to my soul today with our discussions about sports marketing and how you've been able to transform that career and the lives and brands of the famous athletes that you've worked with. The conversation about the sabbatical and planning for that was also very uplifting, and I hope it was uplifting for our audience as well. Any parting words for you?
I really appreciated this conversation. I am looking forward to you talked about Simone 3.0. I am transitioning into our Alicia 2.0, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to step back into my career as the woman who is harmonizing life and ambition. And I hope
Ooh,
that you all can take that in the notion of what it means to harmonize life and ambition. And that's what I stand for. That's what I'm all about. That's what I'm talking all about on my podcast, and so I'm excited about what that looks like for me, and looking forward to seeing that for you too, Simone.
okay, well, thank you. So, everyone, don't forget to check out Hey, It's Arlesha podcast streaming on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. You could also check out Arlesha and connect with her on LinkedIn. And the last name is spelled Amazon, just like your favorite package delivery. So, with that, I'll wrap it up in here today, and I'll see everyone next week on our next edition of the 10X Blueprint podcast. Have a great day.